Okay, so let's see. Moving on to status updates. I can go first since I'm already talking. My focus has shifted to Tecton, as most of you know. Um, right now, what I'm working on is creating a what's called a pipeline. So you could have a pipeline run. And this is more in line with, I guess, how an end user would really just hopefully pick up Tecton and set up their pipeline or this pipeline where it'll pull the source from a Git repository, do all the actions. And one of the features that we're able to incorporate in this pipeline is to determine whether or not we want to run all the tasks or phases separately in separate containers or run them via the creator, right? So kind of like that feature parity with Pack. And so, yeah, like that's one of the main benefits. And again, the hope is that it's easier for users to just pick up and roll into their Tecton CI/CD system. There was a small blocker that I posted an issue to the lifecycle about allowing insecure registries. That's more or less for local development, but I did find that it could potentially help with the migration from the currently self-hosted Windows runner to a more to I guess the one provided by GitHub, because if we do the non-daemon case and you allow for insecure registries, then we don't have to worry about, a whole bunch of the cert setup and all that stuff. So I posted that. I did work around that. I just found the workaround for that this morning. I'll add it to the ticket. It has to do with using ngrok to do the TLS, the SSL cert stuff, and then just dropping down from HTTPS to HTTP when routing locally. So all that works, tested. So I know I've talked a lot, but that's pretty much all I've been doing right now. Any other status updates?
I guess I've been working on implementing the asset packages RFC. So right now, I think I'm at the point where you can make these things, but I have to make them useful. So
Great, great. Anybody else?
I've been working on the proper implementation for lifecycle run as for Windows, but that will likely requires at least one change to Pack, and I had it there as an agenda item to kind of get you all's opinion on it before I go down that route. The security model for Windows is a little quirky and isn't perfectly aligned with Linux, so there's potentially just a different platform thing that has to happen. So yeah, it would potentially be something that all platforms would have to do. So just kind of get your thoughts on that when the time comes.
Cool. Yep, I see it in the agenda. We could do that. All right, last call for status updates. Now moving on to needs discussion for Pack. I'll share that. Although I looked at it earlier today and it doesn't seem like there's anything new or pressing. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that and anybody thinks that there's any of these issues that we need to discuss today. Okay, cool. Let's see, moving on to the next item. Oh, actually we missed release planning. I think Dan just stepped out, but I don't know when the next pack release is. One of the things that I did kind of solidify yesterday for Tecton is I'm going to try to aim for monthly releases or updates to the Tecton catalog. So the next one I'm anticipating to have by the end of February. And So I've set up the milestones for that. The only thing is, because we have 3 resources, 2 tasks and 1 pipeline, they all have different version numbers, which I'm not a fan of, but that is kind of the way that they work. So again, releasing in a month, and yeah, I guess there's not much else to say on that. All right. I think Micah, we're up to yours. You want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure, yeah, and it's not entirely Windows related. So if you have an interest in the execution model for container run, this might introduce a new knob to turn there. The gist is that lifecycle right now, as we probably know, runs as root for daemon cases. I think just for daemon cases, as I say that, but it's most important for there. And then it does a Linux syscall to drop privileges and to impersonate the user that's defined inside the container image. Windows can do almost the same thing, but it can't impersonate a user that's not logged in, or it can't impersonate a user unless that user has an active process running in that environment. So the potential implementation here would be to spin up a container user, an unprivileged process running next to lifecycle, and lifecycle would impersonate that user. It's a little weird, but it's pretty conventional for Windows. The idea is you can't impersonate a user that didn't actively log in somewhere, so you can't just pretend to be someone who didn't create a session. So the requirement for platforms then potentially for Windows only would be there would need to be an active process running with the privileges that you want to impersonate, or that lifecycle would want to impersonate. The spike that I put together mostly just takes container run and then allows it to support optional exec processes as well. So container run would still run as administrator or root, but then you could choose to have extra processes to be exec'd by different users. And that's how Pack would potentially solve this. It would it would exec a process, and this is like Docker exec, and then it would clone its privileges, or clone its user, clone its security context. But nothing else would happen with that exec process. It would just potentially keep running. So that's the idea. There might also be other cases. Maybe this is trying to justify it necessarily, but potentially other use cases for that sort of exec option to happen. If you wanted any sort of like, not necessarily sidecar processes, but you wanted co-processes to run inside of a container, they could hook into that. So I'm kind of wondering what y'all might think, maybe concerns about that primary case that it's trying to solve, or any other additional uses for exec processes that I should keep in mind while implementing this.
Yeah, I definitely recall playing with the exec processes. I don't recall the context, so it definitely doesn't sound too out of the realm. I think it might have even been with like logs, right? I think we might already do something similar with logs.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think the part where I have a question is like, who exactly is it that is impersonating the user? Is that Pack's responsibility that's being set, or is it that Pack is just executing this additional process, as this lower privileged user, and then we are still just executing the life cycle, and the life cycle now has the capability of impersonating the user? Do you, first of all, do you understand like what I'm kind of getting at?
I think so. Yeah, I mean,
So like, is it Pack itself that the one that's, setting more or less the environment? Because ultimately, I guess my question is this something that's set at the container level, right? Or is this something that's set inside of the executable, aka the lifecycle, that's doing the impersonation?
yeah, that's a good question. The life cycle, when it's called, it's going to start receiving, it doesn't yet, but it's going to start receiving the -USID flag, which will be the user ID of the user to impersonate. And so that's sort of where the coupling will happen, is that it'll be Pack that will create this co-process for Lifecycle, and then Lifecycle will look it up by that ID. We'll look for this co-process by that ID, and it's totally a weird model, and it's kind of a abuse of the API between the two potentially. But it sort of follows a little bit the current obligation of Lifecycle to need to know what user to impersonate for Linux, where when it drops privileges down, I'm almost certain it uses that UID flag to do so. It might somehow look it might look it up differently, but I'm pretty sure it just uses that UID flag.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And yeah, that definitely makes sense, right? Again, just because of the Windows limitation. If that limitation wasn't there, I'm sure there'd be a much nicer solution. But for now, for Pack to be just spinning up a process for that purpose seems reasonable. Unless obviously you find something a lot better.
Yeah, I did a couple of approaches. One was giving more privileges to the impersonated user, so we didn't have to run it as root. We just gave it that, sort of super user version of the CNB user. But then then Lifecycle would drop all the privileges. It felt a little risky. It couldn't actually drop all the privileges. It got kind of close to it, but it also felt like Windows starts to behave way more different than Linux in that case. You have to be more concerned about this sort of superized user. There's one other attempt that I made where I tried to stuff the credentials into the container image for this impersonated user. So that's one way that a privileged process could make an unprivileged process, is if it has a real password. That also felt a little scary, just having credentials sitting in there. So this felt like the least worst one so far, but granted, there still might be a better one out there, so I'll keep hacking at it.
I'm trying to think of maybe some prior art or alignment with other systems, and I am curious about something like, I know that GitHub Actions is based off of something Azure related, right? Like some pipeline or something like that. I wonder if that they have a capability, and whether their implementation, like they have a capability to essentially drop permissions, right? As I know, again, I'm trying to relate it to things that I'm working on. So like Tecton and OpenShift, they have ways to essentially affect the privileges and permissions. Given though that that's all Linux related, I would assume it's a lot easier, but I wonder if something similar exists for Azure that translates over.
That's a good call. Definitely check that out. Yeah, I guess any of these products that would have both a Linux and Windows equivalent. Yeah, good call.
Yeah. But I mean, if we have to fall back, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in general, it does feel like a weird requirement for any platform to just make a extra process that Lifecycle can clone from. Right now, obviously, Pack is going to be the one that we'll start it out with, but I'm a little concerned long-term how we have other platforms support this. Kpack, it doesn't look like it's going to affect them because they never need to run in a privileged mode. They can run, since they're not trying to talk to the daemon socket, they don't need to massage permissions ahead of time the way that Pack does. They don't go down this code path inside of Lifecycle, but other platforms might. So,
is it really only the daemon case that's causing this kind of issue?
Yeah, I need to double check. I know I say that. I do think there's some code path in Lifecycle where it only goes down here if it's daemon, but I might be wrong on that.
A bit preoccupied with an incident going on, but I wanted to mention to keep in mind stack packs, because I believe that it's sort of expected that it will be in an elevated mode and then dropping down. So I do think that, so we probably will want to make sure we keep that in mind. Like I said, I wasn't following along completely, but it's something to keep in our heads. I think it's supposed to be the same binary, the same builder binary that's supposed to do the certain build packs and then drop down and do other build packs. So if that's gonna be harder on Windows or something, we may want to explore that together or something sometime.
That's a good call. Yeah, I think this model that I came up with actually should be the best fit for it. It doesn't have to switch processes, and it does. It will guarantee that it's the exact same valid user that it drops privileges to, rather than just trying to guess. Yeah, and in general, in terms of stack packs, I do. This may be another tangent too, but I do feel pretty confident that we can come up with a way to consume stack packs before we can actually author them. So I am kind of interested in trying that out pretty soon here. But yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, because if it was only the Dr. Damon case, I had already advocated, and I think Emily might have been aligned with dropping the Damon case and just supporting registry only, and then Pack kind of changing its implementation to have an ad hoc registry that then it pumps into the Damon. And that would have completely removed the Damon case and thereby the elevated privileges. But because of Stack Pack, right? Like that's not going to go away anytime soon or anytime now. So yeah.
That's cool. And the functionality is very similar with the leading implementation I have so far in terms of the Windows and the Linux stuff. So it's good that it does give me some confidence that the stack packs and the privilege dropping should work.
Awesome. That's great.
So I'll spike it out and then probably make a pre-release set of binaries for y'all to play with if you have any interest.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing that.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. We've reached the end of our agenda. Is there anything else last minute? All right. Well, then I hope everybody has a good week. See you all online.